At the height of their power in the Australian biker underworld, the Comancheros had it all.
6 senior Comancheros gang members have been arrested.
The numbers, the controversy, and the perfect man at the helm. A man who sat in the company of Australia's most wanted criminals. But the underground biker world has always been unpredictable. It could all go wrong in a heartbeat. And it does when a brawl ensues at the Sydney airport between the Comanchero Supreme Commander and one of his biggest enemies. A brawl that ultimately leads to his murder.
Mahmoud Mick Hawi was a Lebanese-Australian outlaw, biker, and gangster who served as the second national president and supreme commander of the Comanchero Motorcycle Club until 2018, when he was brutally assassinated by one of his close friends.
Talk about betrayal among brotherhood. And today, we shall delve into Mick Hawi's legacy, his rise to the top of the Australian biker world, and his ultimate downfall. A story of struggle, betrayal, and sacrifice. Stick around. Thrust into a new life. Born in May 1980 in Beirut, Lebanon, Mahmoud Mick Hawi had a normal childhood for the first 5 years. But in 1985, it was disrupted when his family fled to New South Wales, Australia, due to the Lebanese Civil War.
Starting over and growing up in the streets of Sydney, Hawi had to mature fast.
By 1995, he had already started to date an Australian woman after dropping out of high school at the age of 16. He joined his father's spray painting business, and it opened the doors to a whole new world that he had never imagined existed. Introduction to the biker underworld. Working with his father and being exposed to the real world, Hawi started making new friends from the Comanchero Motorcycle Club. At the age of 19, he decided to officially join the club, and thanks to his tall, muscular build, he had an easy entry into the club. Just the kind of physical toughness needed. As a new member, he had to lay low for a while.
When joining the Comanchero MC, new members are given time to hang around the more experienced bikers and learn the club's ways. However, not everyone makes it through this stage, but Hawi did.
Something was brewing inside him. He quickly developed a thirst for power, and he knew how to earn it best. His growing resentment against the Comanchero boss forced him to start a revolution in the club. And in 2002, he led a group of younger Comancheros to the home of the founder and supreme leader of the Comancheros, Jock Ross. They beat him up severely and took his club colors and his Harley-Davidson bike. This was the beginning of Hawi's rise to prominence. Not long after the incident, he declared himself the new national president of the Comanchero Motorcycle Club in Australia.
This is now my club. You will all do what I say.
But if he thought this would be a smooth sail, boy, was he wrong. Rule of the unwanted president. After beating up the club's founder, Hawi's reign as national president was seen as illegitimate by a faction inside the club. And it was always going to be a turbulent one.
Shortly after taking over, he was set up to be arrested and convicted of drug possession, but the charges couldn't stick.
He was released just in time to deal with another disaster. In December 2005, the famous Cronulla riots began. An altercation between Lebanese youth and Australian lifeguards triggered them, and the riots escalated and spread to other parts of the country. Hawi called for peace by speaking to the Bra Boys gang and warning them of their involvement in the riots, successfully bringing an end to the chaos. But his woes within the club got worse. In November 2007, he narrowly escaped death when the car he was traveling in was sprayed with bullets outside Grappa Ristorante, Sydney. He was lucky. One of the bullets got lodged in the headrest of the driver's seat, but from then on he was convinced that someone was out to get him, and he began to travel in a bulletproof car as a precaution. The next year, Hawi led the club through his first major brawl with a rival motorcycle club.
Conflicts between bike clubs are not uncommon, especially if they run their operations in the same area. They are usually intense, and they could go on for months, even years.
And then it happened. Comancheros versus the Hells Angels. In 2008, the Comanchero were involved in a struggle with the Australian Hells Angels. The conflict led to only minor brawls and attacks. But in March 2009, it blew up when Hawi bumped into the Hells Angels national president, Derek Wainohu, at the Sydney airport. Hawi and Derek were supposed to be on the same flight from Melbourne.
they disembarked, Hawi punched Derek Wainahu and issued a series of threats.
And they exchanged words at the gates before calling for reinforcements. When their respective members arrived, they engaged each other at Gate 5 by grabbing metal poles and swinging them at each other.
But still, the Hells Angels were outnumbered, and one of them, Anthony Zervas, tried to stab Hawi with a pair of scissors.
Hell broke loose, with metal bollards weighing up to 13 kilograms used as weapon.
The brawl ended with Anthony dead on the floor, his head fractured by a 17-kilogram metal bollard as the Comancheros hurriedly boarded a taxi. The police began investigating the incident, and footage of the attack captured by airport security cameras was replayed on TV stations, portraying bike club members as violent and merciless.
In Australia, there was this popular image of motorcycle clubs as lovable people who had been overlooked and labeled outcasts by society because of their different views. But all that ended with the release of the footage from the Sydney airport brawl.
Afterward, Hawi knew that the police would be searching for him, so he went into hiding. But the brawl brought him more recognition and marked the beginning of the end for him. Trial of a president. Hawi didn't stay on the run for long, and he came out when everything seemed to have settled. But the police silently continued with their investigations until one Comanchero came out and gave testimony against his fellow club members.
Today, a Comanchero insider broke the gang's rule of silence when he took to the stand at a committal hearing. Keith Breen reports.
Motorcycle clubs have a code of silence and an oath of secrecy, but one Comanchero decided to break it. This was after the police grilled him for hours and promised to give him protection against the club, who would obviously be seeking revenge for the betrayal.
The confession led to the arrest of Hawi and 10 other Comancheros. He was charged with second-degree murder. Even though he didn't kill Anthony himself, he caused the brawl that led to his death. The prosecution provided a detailed and chilling account of the events leading up to Anthony's death, backed up by security footage from the airport.
The witness, known only by the initials AL, told the court he was one of several people asked to meet Comanchero boss Mick Hawi as he arrived on a flight from Melbourne. Hells Angel President Derek Wainahu was also on the flight.
The Hells Angels were clearly outnumbered, but the Comancheros still went at them with full force.
AL described how the Comancheros were then approached by Hells Angels members, one with his hands in his pockets. He recalled a Comanchero saying, "He's got weapons, he's got a gun." The court heard that the Hells Angel then produced a knife or scissors and stabbed the Comanchero boss in the arm. Later, AL saw the man who used the knife lying on the ground.
Moreover, skin flakes whose DNA matched Hawi's were also recovered on the deceased's body. And with that evidence, Hawi was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to at least 28 years in prison.
Mick Hawi, the one-time kingpin of the Comancheros bikie gang, will spend up to 28 and a half years in jail over the deadly brawl at Sydney Airport in 2009.
The other Comancheros were tried on lesser charges, but Hawi's conviction came as a relief to Anthony's family.
I just pray that he gets the punishment he deserves. My son didn't deserve to die.
But their joy was only short-lived. After 3 years in prison, Hawi appealed the conviction and took a plea bargain. In September 2014, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and his sentence was reduced to a maximum of 6 years and 2 months. However, in 2015, he was released on parole and on account of time already served. He impressed authorities with his proper conduct in prison and his suitable post-release plans, but they didn't let him out without strict conditions. His 22 parole conditions included not owning any firearms and cutting off all association with his former club. This meant that things would never be the same for him as he was used to. The biker lifestyle, and only had biker friends. Murdered in cold blood. After his release from prison, Hawi struggled to make new connections away from the biker underworld. He spent most of his time at the Rockdale Fitness First Gym, and that's where he spent the last few moments of his life. On February 14, 2014, he was sitting in his car in the parking lot when he was shot. It was a targeted and well-planned strike that left him in critical condition. The first responders to the incident tried to keep him alive, but he died shortly after arriving at the hospital. According to the police, the hitman fled in a vehicle, which was later found torched not far from the crime scene. CCTV footage also showed two men dressed in black running in a nearby street from the scene of the burning car. The police suspected the two men to be Yusuf Nazlioglu and Jamal El-Jaidi, and the burned car may have been a distraction. Yusuf was one of the few friends Hawi had made while out on parole.
But as Hawi's wife testified during the trial, their relationship had turned sour after a fishing trip, where Hawi claimed that Yusuf had embarrassed him.
Detectives also pursue alternative leads, including his disagreement with his predecessor in the Comanchero ranks. Yusuf and his co-accused were initially acquitted of the charges by a jury, but testimony from a tow truck driver who transported the getaway car and DNA found in the car took Yusuf to the top of the suspects list again. And in June 2022, Yusuf was also executed in the same way Hawi was.
Yusuf's death left more questions than answers about Hawi's murder, but Hawi left behind a legacy as one of the most notorious bikers in the Australian outlaw biker history.